numbers are actually a little bit better than they look because the Verizon strike is reflected in those numbers, and those people have gone back to work. So, you know, it's not quite as bad as it looks. The bad news is wages also went down just a little bit. So that's what happens when there's a lot of unemployed people. It's hard to ask for a raise. And I think that that is significant because what it says is it's not just the people who are unemployed who are suffering, although they're suffering the most, but there are a lot of people now who are very insecure about hanging on to their job. And that insecurity is real. It's not just some neurosis. And I think it's weighing on the economy overall. If you're worried about whether you're going to keep your job, you're unlikely to go out and spend. And as Mark was saying, if you're the CEO of a company, that means that maybe you're going to hold back on making big investments because you're not sure that the consumer demand is going to be there to support them.
There's a bit of a feel of a chicken and an egg thing going on here, Mark, because consumers aren't buying things because they're worried they're going to lose their jobs, and companies aren't hiring people because they're worried consumers won't buy.
Yeah, good point. But this is the same chicken and egg problem we always have at this point in the business cycle, and it's always broken by business people deciding, hey, you know what? I can't continue to grow my earnings, maintain my stock price, if I don't look for revenue opportunity, if I don't take that leap of faith, if I don't let those animal spirits run a little bit and take a chance, invest and hire people. And so we've gotten pretty close to that happening at different points in the last year and a half. Of course, recent events have been a real problem for business confidence, but assuming that, that we don't have any other missteps here, I think businesses are going to look at their balance sheet, they're going to look at their profits, they're going to look at all that cash, and they're going to say, you know what, I got to take a chance, I'm going to start to hire, and that's going to create the income that'll support the consumer spending, that'll get businesses to hire even more, and we'll get into that self-reinforcing business cycle that we've always gotten to in the past.
At the same time, though, Mark, we are looking in this report at a decline in the number of hours worked, average number of hours worked. Does that give you pause?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good, that's a leading indicator of jobs. I mean, businesses will cut hours before they actually cut workers. So that is a disconcerting sign. One positive sign, though, is that I think at least so far, businesses have not increased layoffs. They've cut back on their hiring. They have hiring freezes in place, and that's why we're not getting any job growth. But they're not increasing layoffs, and that would be what we need for a recession. So hopefully they won't do that, and they'll gain some traction and start hiring again.
Christian, there are three hard-hit places: government, manufacturing, and construction. Just dissect those three and tell me why.
Well, government is pretty obvious. Governments are actually cutting spending, and I think that's the opposite of what Mark would counsel when he was talking about needing concerted government action. So what you're having happen right now is the government is adding to the problem by laying more people off.
Basically state governments, too, we're talking about here.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, that is not the classic response to a recession. Classically, you've had the government be able to hire, but partly because of the deficit debate and partly, I think, because of, you know, this extreme ideological divide in America, the government is unable to do that. Construction, Candy, I think is self-evident. There was a huge construction bubble and there was a huge mortgage bubble. And that means that there are not a lot of people, you know, there's an overhang of housing stock, and not a lot of people are building new houses. People are having a hard time selling the houses they already have. The manufacturing number is the one that actually worries me the most, because I think at the beginning of the recovery, we actually saw manufacturing picking up, and you were able to say, wow, maybe this is a little bit of a turnaround, and maybe American manufacturing in particular is making a recovery in the global economy overall. So that was the figure that made me the most depressed.
And let me wrap this up with the same question for both of you. Christian, I want to begin with you. Give me the top two things you think Washington should do, not whether it will be able to do it because of partisan bickering, but should do to get this economy out of idle, essentially.
I would say spending on infrastructure and
roads and bridges.
Roads and bridges, which puts people to work, and cut the payroll tax. And I would just make a final point, which is we talk about this stuff as if it's just numbers, but the thing that I think should worry us the most is long-term high unemployment, which is what America is now experiencing and is unusual for the United States. That leaves generational scars. Some of those people will never have jobs. Kids are going into a labor market that is really, really tough, and it could change America for the worse.
Mark, let me get your comment on that, because I do think that kids come into an America that's very different from the one that I started in the job market. But I also want to get your thoughts on the top two things the president and Congress can do to help.
Only two, Candy. Can I have more, please?
Sure.
I would second Chris just two, and then I would also argue that we need corporate tax reform. We need to focus on broadening the tax base, getting rid of those loopholes, or at least scaling them back. Will generate enough revenue to help with deficit reduction, and we can also lower those marginal tax rates for businesses to allow them to compete in a global in the global economy. We need them to be able to export. That's where jobs are going to come in the future, and that's where our kids and our grandkids are going to get their jobs, from producing the things that the rest of the world will want from them and the things that they produce.
So just as because I'm a political junkie, that sounds like the Huntsman plan, at least so far as the corporate tax reform.
Well, actually, I think there's pretty broad support for that across the political spectrum. The president, the Treasury, Republican Congress, Governor Huntsman. So that's why I mention it. I think there's it's hard work, because each tax deduction and credit has someone who's going to defend it. They're going to go to the mat for it. So it's politically hard to get done. But I think at the end of the day, that's something that economically makes sense, and politically it also makes sense.
Mark Zandi, Chrystia Freeland, thank you so much.